Welcome everyone to another episode of Life Stories Unscripted podcast. I'm your host Viviane, and I'm a doula, breastfeeding specialist, and a mama coach, and I focus on everything related to preconception, pregnancy, birth, postpartum, and everything in between. So if you're a parent or you're trying to be one, this is the podcast for you, so stay tuned. Today I'm talking to Zuzana Svepešová, who is a dating/relationship coach and a psychologist, and it's the third time she's on this show. I am so excited because today we're going to talk about boundaries. What boundaries are, how to spot if something's wrong, if the boundaries are not set properly, and what to do about it. If you've seen some of my previous episodes and you really like this podcast, please hit the subscribe button now so me and you can share the word on boundaries together. Last but not least, this podcast is sponsored by Perfecta Placenta, located in Beverly Hills, which is a placenta preserving company. So if you would like your miracle organ to be preserved and get a stretch mark cream and a diaper bag from me as a gift, use my promo code Viviane. And for more information, I can be reached either via Facebook or LinkedIn under my name, Viviane Schima, or via my email address, which is groupwithviviane@gmail.com. Don't hesitate to reach out. And as promised, let's talk to Zuzana. Enjoy. Hi, Susie, again. It's
Hello.
So good to see you. Thank you for being here and again sharing your wisdom. I'm very excited.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm really happy to be here and very excited to discuss today's topic because yes, we can go to many rabbit holes, and I'm excited to discuss that and explore with you.
Absolutely. And I think you said it just perfectly that we can take a lot of avenues that can lead us to rabbit holes, but let's try avoid them. And let's just start in the beginning and talk about what boundaries are and what is the understanding in today's society of boundaries and what it maybe should be.
Okay. Yes, I love that you're asking this, and I think we're starting at a great point. So what I'm gonna say to start with, I'm gonna use not a general definition, but the definition what Cambridge Dictionary offers. Just so what's general, right? What people can look up, and then we'll go from there, because sometimes this may be like, oh, I'm not really sure what that means. So for example, Cambridge Dictionary describes boundaries as a real or imagined line that marks the edge or limit of something, the limit of a subject or principle, the limit of what someone considers to be acceptable behavior. So that pretty much makes sense, but it can be like, that sounds a bit too logical, Yes. So maybe, why I'm reading this is because sometimes maybe we go through life and we may come across someone who tells us, oh, you need to set a boundary. And we're like, what does that mean? Like, I don't even know what that means. Yeah. So and we may look this up, and this is what comes up. And it's like, it pretty much makes sense. But okay, so what are the boundaries? It may be more I don't know how to define it. Like, I'm just gonna say, yeah. So it's basically how we may perceive it is like spoken or unspoken limits, okay, or some kind of rules we have, okay. And what basically that is, it's a cue for other people how to treat you, okay. And it's also a way of taking care of yourself, way of you feeling safe. But bottom line is, like even the definition suggests, that it's some kind of limit where there are different kinds of boundaries: emotional boundaries, physical boundaries, boundaries with your time, like with your money, and so on and on. So it's about the limit. Where is my limit of what I feel I can do, I want to do, okay? And that's connected to what you want, and what you need. Okay, so and yeah, so in a nutshell, that's what the boundaries are.
Wonderful. I have a question right from the beginning. What if you set a boundary to yourself, and then you cross the limit? Is there a punishment? Is there a repercussion? What happens?
That's a great question. Okay, so there are three ways how you can, simplistically speaking, how we tend to respond to ourselves. And one way is that we respect it and we're being kind to ourselves. We say, like, okay, across this boundary, this is what I've learned. I'm not going to repeat it, or I'm going to adjust my behavior, my thinking, and so on and on. The second way how we can respond to ourselves is we may look for the advice or guidance from someone else and go like, okay, I don't know, someone else knows better. I messed up, I've tried it, doesn't work. I'm going to ask for, I don't know, basically, I'm not good enough, right? So I'm going to look for the answer on the outside. Or the third way, and that's punishing ourselves and going like, oh, you're silly, like you don't know how to do this, and we just not being nice to ourselves. So so there are the three ways how we, simplistically speaking, respond to ourselves. But I would even go a step back before we get to that response and maybe explore what caused me or what caused that person who broke that boundary with themselves to break that boundary, because that goes typically back to commitment to yourself, right? And so what am I committed to? Because we always committed to something, even if it doesn't seem that way, because sometimes we can be committed to remaining in our safety. So let's say you want to go to the gym in the morning and you say, I'm going to be there at 8 o'clock in the morning. So you set up your alarm clock for 7, the alarm clock goes off and you just snooze it, then you go like, I'm gonna go tomorrow, right? So you start your day by disappointing yourself or saying to yourself like, nah, like you're not committed to yourself, so what you're saying, it doesn't matter. Right? So but what that essentially means is that you're more committed, even if it's just 51% over 49, you're slightly more committed to that comfort. Right? So we're always committed to something. So what am I committed to? Excuse me. And then another part of this is self-integrity, which means I'm going to do what I said I'm going to do. Right? So am I being in integrity with myself? Or am I not? Right? So it's going back to ourselves, right? So so these are some of the few things, but that's when we go to exploration about ourselves. However, one vital part of this, which is also helpful to look at, is if this is a repeating thing, where does that come from? Like where this response, what I'm doing, where this constant thing of me being out of integrity and not acting on my boundaries, where does that come from? And you often discover that you've learned this. We often learn these things. So when we discover that we don't have, like, we have either rigid boundaries or they are like permeable, or we have healthy boundaries, they often are like a copy of, or they look very similar to what your parents or your primary carers had. So yes, so there are a few areas where you may want to look at. So
do you think it could have something to do also with self-love, that you are you tell to yourself, okay, I'm gonna do this tomorrow, and then you don't? Can this be linked to self-love for yourself?
Definitely, because boundaries are a way of self-care. Yeah. And we take care of things we love or that matter to us, right? Whether it's physical, material. For example, you have a car, you love that car, you take care of it, like you polish it, and all that stuff. So we take care of those things. So if you don't take care of your boundaries, the question is why? Excuse me, right? So what's behind it? And once again, that goes back to how were the boundaries modeled in your household, you know? For example, taking care of yourself in itself, that's a boundary. So what did your mom and dad, what did they show you about taking care of themselves, right? And when you're little, you just observe. But you know, it's I think there is a quote, I can't remember it, exactly. I can't remember who said it, but basically that kids are very good at not listening to the elders, but they are really good at modeling them. You know, they never fail to model people, their parents or elders, right? So what you discover that kids go like, oh, no, they may not listen, but they watch and they model what you're doing, right?
Absolutely. Yes, I agree. Even if, even if they see something like kids at preschool do something, oftentimes they come home with this new, phrase or this new movement that you didn't see.
Yes.
Where did this come from? Especially if you've never done that. It's like, yeah, like they picked it up at the preschool, like from their peers or even teachers, or, they just soak everything in without us even realizing sometimes. But this is so fascinating and brings me to the drama triangle again in some sort. Um, because, and for listeners and viewers who have not seen that episode, please go back, pause, and watch it. It's really worth your time. So I'm just going to elaborate on it, that we talked about that you have a victim, a persecutor, and a rescuer, right? And you mentioned that we didn't really go into what happens after you break the boundary, after you don't listen to yourself. We did not really quite elaborate on that yet, but one of the things you said, one of the possibilities of what you could do is ask someone else for help. And that into the victim mentality, right? Essentially, that you yourself can't do anything. You don't know what to do. So you're looking for the rescuer, which essentially is not helping you, but it's hindering you to reflect, truly reflect, and have a talk with yourself. Okay, we have to change something. I have to change something, and put yourself into the creator mode.
Absolutely. It's one of the reasons why someone may struggle to set boundaries is because they may have this mindset, it's not me, it's them, or it's everyone else, right? So that's someone who's got that victim mentality. And once again, like we already discussed it in the previous episode, this is often learned. We learn it from someone from somewhere, that oh no, I can't do anything about it, there is no way I can control it, there is nothing I can do, hands up, right? So it's that mentality that it's not me, it's not them, right? And then you're helpless basically, and that means that you have unhealthy boundaries, which means that people, it goes back to knowing what your needs and wants are, and to be able to express them and act on it accordingly, right? But if you're not really clear on what those needs are, and if you're not open already, or you haven't been modeled that how to take care of that and how to take accountability for that, then your boundaries are very fluent, not existent, right? So it's that's one of the ways how you if you find yourself blaming others or blaming everything else, blaming, maybe that's not the right word, if you are kind of
Delegating.
saying, sorry,
if you're delegating, right? Sort of.
Yes, if you feel like everything else and everyone else is the reason for your misfortune, or that you are finding certain things challenging,
Right.
that may be the point where, like, it's okay, am I being in victim mentality, like, and where do I need to set my boundaries, how am I treating myself, you
Right.
know
And is this making me happy? Is this beneficial for me? These thoughts I'm having, these physical reactions I'm having to my environment, you know? Because if you are delegating your problems onto the weather and day of the week and other people, it's not fair, I think, to yourself, but also to them. Because
mm-hmm,
you need to look within, and it's also, I think it's not as hard to look in yourself and finding out what is causing this, because the world is just like a big mirror, I imagine. And if something keeps happening to you over and over and over again, and you keep receiving that same misfortune or that same pattern from a thing, from a person, from a circumstance, from an environment, something that you can't even like touch physically, but you are getting it, I think it's sending you a signal. It's reflecting something from within you that you might struggle with, that you have not yourself processed enough.
mm-hmm,
And I think it's mostly comes from trauma, right?
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yes, it's you put it in a perfect way, that the world around you is basically your mirror, And one thing that came up for me as I was listening to you was, and I think something to look out for, because there is a danger of basically internalizing everything what's happening to you. On one hand, it's very empowering state to be in, and because you can suddenly see, like, okay, so if everything is around me is a mirror, then I'm the creator of, what's being mirrored, right? But then there is a dangerous place where a person can go and they can go in a place where, oh my gosh, right, now everything is mirrored, so what have I been doing, right? So it's important to maybe grasp it from the place that, okay, so what that means is that I can change it,
Right.
as opposed to I don't have any power over this, right? So, and any unhelpful thought I have is just mirrored, right? So it's not necessarily the case, but at least it gives you the option, it gives you the choice, because you can, the fact that it's everything is mirrored, you can look at it, you can reflect, and you can learn from it,
Yeah.
right? You can look at it, okay, it happened again, so what am I learning from this? What got me to say yes again if I really felt like I didn't want to say yes, right? What can I do differently? Who can help me to start setting boundaries? Where can I start? What is the smallest step, right? And as I'm saying this, and maybe we've touched on it previously, it's about asking the right questions, you know, rather than going like, why is this happening? Why is this happening to me? Why can I never set boundaries? Why am I so weak? Right? Because your brain goes and looks for these answers, and it will give you all the answers why you're weak or you've been weak so far. But if you ask your mind and yourself, why can I totally start setting healthy boundaries? Your
Yeah.
mind will go and look for those answers, right? So it's about what questions you're asking yourself in the process as well. So
Right, exactly. Instead of asking questions that are filled with a negative um essence, I would say,
mm-hmm,
you can ask a question, um, why am I worthy of setting boundaries for myself? Why do I deserve it? and it changes completely. It shifts your thought process, and then it changes the emotion that comes with it. Because why am I worthy? Because I am. It doesn't have to there doesn't have to be necessarily an answer to that, because I am human, because I love myself, and even with my flaws, this is me, and I love me. And just because we're all human, we all make mistakes, we all have our flaws, but it's not a bad thing. And I think this is really important to realize, that your flaws are making you essentially you. They're like a fingerprint, they're like a signature to you, and you can work with those flaws. You can work with them so they benefit you in the long run, I believe.
Absolutely, absolutely. Obviously, there is a part of your life where you just take things, and that's when you're a child, right? You're like a sponge, and you do it because of your survival. You just have to, because your mind, your body doesn't have a full capacity of critical thinking, and so you just take everything what's around you. But at a certain point, you have a choice, and you can decide whether what you've been thought, what you've been modeled, whether that's something that you want to keep, or perhaps something you want to shift, you want to change, and when you're on that journey, you may notice that for example, with boundary setting, you may notice that there is, I don't know, silent treatment. When you say a different opinion to your mom or dad, right? And they give you silent treatment instead of communicating, right? Okay, I don't really agree with what you said, but let's talk about it. Let's see what we can do about you, right? They just walk off and you don't talk for a week, right? And you may find yourself doing exactly the same thing, right? But when you get curious and you decide that you want to change this, and you track it where it actually comes from, you discover that your mom's mom was responding exactly the same way, your grandma was exactly the same, right? Or very, very similar. So what's great about this, that you have a choice to break that cycle. The question is, am I open? Am I willing? Am I ready to do this? So that's one thing. And I just want to briefly go back to what you said. And I was gonna say, like, the whole method, because the questions you said, like, why am I worthy? Why can I do this? So that's something, and for our listeners and people who are watching this episode, there is one method. It's called PAW method, from neurolinguistic programming, and I absolutely love it. And you can apply it to boundaries, to any area of your life, really. And it consists of 3 key questions you can ask yourself, and that can start shifting your mindset. And so you already mentioned 2 of them. So PAW stands for P, possibility, A, ability, and W, worthiness. So why is it, the 3 questions are, why is it totally possible for me to set healthy boundaries in my work, in my relationships, and so on and on, with my kids? A, why am I absolutely able to set those boundaries? And W, why am I worthy? Or why do I deserve to set and to have and maintain clear and healthy boundaries? Now, what you may discover, that these 3 questions can be literally blowing your mind, because you may need to sit on them, you may need to ponder on them for a week, sometimes for even longer, but it's well worth looking into that. So it's a PAW method, something very simple to consider when it comes to setting your boundaries.
That's wonderful. And I honestly did not know. It just felt natural to me to just ask that question,
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not gonna pretend I'm this super boundary setter. And but
I'm still learning, Vivi. I'm still learning.
I had my fair share of unhealthy boundaries, toxic relationships, and I think that is really the best teacher when it comes to realizing, okay, there is something probably that I could be doing to benefit myself better, to make my mental health better, because essentially it does take a toll on your mental health. And once it starts taking a toll on your mental health, it goes on to your physical health. It just eats on you, like from within, like an acid. And I think the sooner you start asking these questions, even if you might have really healthy boundaries, I think there's nothing wrong with asking the questions anyway, and just do like a mental health check, if you wish, with yourself. But I also think a very important thing to say here is that no one should blame themselves for having unhealthy boundaries, because I think it's never too late. It's never too late to change something. It's never too late to start doing better. I would love to expand on a feeling that comes with this a lot, which is guilt and shame. That when people realize this about themselves and they start shifting it and changing it, and they start to feel empowered, and they start to feel really good about themselves and having really positive feedback from their environment, from people around them, there's a lot of times guilt comes in and it sneaks up on you from behind, and it makes you, like, essentially the guilt is not yours, but someone else, by what they're doing or saying to you, can make you feel guilty. And I think that's another layer of the boundary setup.
That's a biggie. That's a biggie with setting boundaries, that feeling we have when when we're faced with a situation where we really want to say no, but we say yes, and we just feel it. We feel guilty, or we say no, but we have this very unpleasant feeling inside, or that we're being mean, and we're not being nice, and people will not like us, they will reject us. We can't possibly do that, right? So, but as you already pointed out, and I think we've touched on it even previously, because it often comes back to that, and feeling itself is just another step. But what step is before that? And that's a thought, and that's a story, and that's a narrative, so so who taught you to be guilty about saying no? Where does that come from? So what's the reason that you're not feeling confident, that you feel safe and at ease, right? Because guilt is a result of, or any emotion comes from or follows a thought. So what's the thought that's happening before that? And again, that's often subconscious, that's often learned. Parents are like, you have to be nice to everyone, you have to give a chance to every single guy who you meet, and so on and on. So
this is wonderful. This is mind-blowing to me, that how far your thoughts can go and sabotage your way of thinking and your self-love, essentially.
I think what was just coming up for me is what I mentioned at the very start, and that was those 3 ways how we can respond to ourselves, but also that's exactly the same way, or in different shade or form, how our parents or other people can respond to us. So they can either say, I hear you and I respect what you said. I may not necessarily share the same opinion, but I respect what you said, right? So that's one way. And then we go, or the next thing is like in our personal way, when we don't know what to do, so we can look for someone else's opinion. But when it comes from the other side, the person can go like, oh no, what you're saying is not true, I know better. So they start telling you what they think, right? So let's say if you're a child and your parent goes like, let's say you don't want to, I don't know, eat a broccoli when you're 3 years old, right? And you really don't like it. And your parent goes like, no, I know better, you should eat your fruit and veg. And they really try to, you know, instill that in you, right? Even if you don't like it. Um and then there are different scenarios when you're an adult, right? Like, no, you don't know what you're saying, listen to me, right? And then there is a third way when we're being punished, right? So let's say you're a child, you don't want to hug a certain adult, right? I don't want to hug my auntie or whatever. And your parent goes, or your primary care goes like, oh, you can't be like, no, mommy will be upset, you know, like you have to be nice to people, go and hug the auntie, you know. So what happens there is that first your boundary is disrespected, because children have boundaries until they are told that they don't have boundaries, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's about just listening. And obviously there is another element of this where we have to teach them like, okay, you don't walk into the fire, or you don't touch a hot stove, right? There. Okay, but I think we'll get to that, like how to set those boundaries, and you know, like how to still be respectful. Excuse me. But yeah, there's that third part where we basically gaslight ourselves, we ignore ourselves, or we're being ignored, right? There are different ways how people respond to our boundaries. Yeah, so it's gaslighting, is testing, like, oh, come on, you know, like, come on, let's go outside, you know, like, why would you sit at home or have another pint, right? So, or yeah, yeah, so there are many different ways how people can come back because they suddenly feel uncomfortable, especially if you've haven't had clear boundaries and healthy boundaries. This can be a shock to the other side, whoever that is, right? So what comes to mind is like accommodation or adjustment period, right? So allow yourself and the other person to do that, right? So when you say something and the other person may not like it, or even like we've talked about boundaries with yourself, you set something for yourself and you might not like it, it feels uncomfortable. And I think we again, we've talked about it, and if we haven't previously, it's coming out of your comfort zone, it's something new, right? So allow that adjustment period for yourself or for you and someone else, as you're setting that boundary, right? Because it can be uncomfortable, it may take time to apply the new ways of thinking and behaving, treating each other, right? And what comes hand in hand here is repetition, because often, and one of the reasons why we lack boundaries is that perhaps we tried, but we were ignored, we were again gaslit, we were tested. So we essentially felt like, oh, it failed, I'm not doing it, you know, it doesn't work, that way of communicating doesn't work. So what's important here as you are introducing that change, a new boundary, is to repeat yourself. It may sound a bit daunting, and you may even feel like a parrot maybe, because you're like, I'm just repeating the same sentence, but that's essentially what you need. Oh, you don't have to explain yourself, but I think we may get to that, like how to actually set it and be clear literally in 2-3 sentences. So yeah.
And yes, I absolutely agree. And I think there's so many things that came up for me while you were talking. And I think with what I'm going to rewind a little bit to go back to the broccoli, the fruit and veggies eating. I think it just runs so deep from when you're a child to when you have your own children. And I see it all the time that a mom wants to breastfeed and her mom did not, or she did, but wasn't very successful, didn't have the support, didn't quite trust her body. So she switched to formula, and now she is not forcing, but it is like pseudo forcing her ideas, her experience, her knowledge onto her daughter, that you should just do this. Why even trying? Just do this. And then the daughter, if there is a lack of boundaries, if there is a lack of self-integrity and self-love, and there's confusion, which obviously comes with motherhood, especially if you're a first-time mom, you are going with the flow. You are literally experiencing new things every day by the hour. And it can it can gnaw again on your mind, the thoughts, because you don't want to disappoint your mom. But you also have an inkling, you have an intuition, because you know your baby best and you know your body best and you trust yourself. And that trust can be very easily disrupted if there is a lack of boundaries, I feel like. And I think that, which brings me to another thing that came up for me, is that realizing that you have a choice, that you can maintain the control over the situation, over yourself, really, to say, like you said, I hear what you're saying. Thank you very, very much for this insight, but I'm doing this. I'm comfortable with this, and I'd love for you if you would accept it. And I completely respect if you don't want to accept it, but I'm doing this. And I think that once we realize this, once we realize we have a choice and we can respond instead of react, again, coming back to a lot of other things we talked previously about, I think that changes the whole game into being empowered rather than disempowered, because then essentially no one is owning you. You own yourself. You own your own property, essentially. And no one should make you feel guilty about that. And I think that the guilt is a very, very good indicator that when you do feel like you do what you want to do, despite what everyone else says, but the guilt starts coming in. And I think that is a very good indicator into a minor lack of boundaries, because once you feel the guilt, it means someone else, by what they said or did in front of you, can make you feel guilty. Why? Why is that? If you trust yourself and your body, and if you are loving yourself, no one should make you feel guilty for what you do. You can question yourself, am I doing the right thing? Is this really rational? Well, maybe get a third opinion, fourth or a fifth, right? But you should always stick to your intuition, to what your voice and your mind and your body is telling you. And that brings me to the last thing, which is consent, what you tapped on with children. Especially, I think, in some cultures, it's a very big thing where children are raised, go kiss your mommy, go kiss your grandma. And the child says, I don't want to. And they say, well, that's not nice. Like, grandma will be very sad. You should go kiss her. I don't agree with that. I don't resonate with that, because it's essentially taking the right to consent from your child at such a young age, and which can result in horrible things later on, right? That I'm not going to talk about, but I think everyone knows where I'm going with this. And I think that asking a child, do you want to give me a kiss? No. Okay, that's fine. Do you want to give me a high five instead, or a hug? And if they say no, that's completely, and we shouldn't make them feel bad about that, because we essentially are ingraining in them, like in themselves, feel bad that you don't want to give me a hug, that you, with your own body that is yours, no one else's, do not want to touch me. And that's not the right approach. And I think the right approach is accepting it, because sometimes you don't feel like it. You feel touched out by your children because you're still breastfeeding, or just in general, and maybe you just don't want to give someone else a hug. And I think it's more than okay.
Absolutely. The question is, when did I learn that it's not okay? Who
Right.
told me that it's not okay? Right. And this is like exactly what you described. Like, let's say you're 4 years old and you told, go and hug your auntie, right? Or uncle or someone, and you don't want to. And it's that response of your parent or your carer, right? That starts forming who you basically are. That's what you're taking this, right? And they say like, oh, like auntie will be upset or mommy will be upset, right? So what's essentially happening in that split moment is that you are taught to question your own intuition to start with, to your own needs. That tells you like, okay, so this person is telling me what I need is not right. And if this is repeated, you grow up into a first class people pleaser, right?
Yeah.
You're gonna go like, no, what I feel is not right. I shouldn't be doing this. So let me just check in with someone, right? If you're a person who constantly needs to, you can't make a decision without checking in with someone else. Why is that, right?
We're back in the drama triangle.
There we go, right? Yeah. And yeah, for example, persecute, a person who's part of drama triangle, very rigid boundaries, very strict rules. You can't do that, black and white, you know. So it's going back to your home, like where did I learn this, But then again, choosing that, again, I think I mentioned it previously, like doing the inventory of like um your own rules or your own shoots. So if you want to, let's say, look into like, okay, what actually are my boundaries? Because I love this topic and it sounds like some of my boundaries may not be in place, right? So how do I recognize what my boundaries are? So one of the easiest way is to sit down, take a piece of paper and write down, think about what were the shoulds, you know, in your household. What were the rules? And the easiest way you recognize it is like what you were told repeatedly you should do or you shouldn't do. Because boundaries are normally, as we started with, like there's some kind of limit, some kind of rules, spoken or unspoken. So, for example, how could I never behave when I was little? Or how did I have to communicate, what was acceptable, what was never acceptable in my household, could I be happy child or could I be happy child only when my mom and dad were okay, So, and what did I learn, right? So there's so many areas you can explore, but yeah, they're normally formulated in shoulds. So what were your shoulds? What were your rules when you were growing up? So, and then you can check in, do I want to keep these? Like you mentioned, are they helpful to me and my relationship? Like you mentioned, breastfeeding. Is this what I want to do?
Yeah.
Or is this what I don't want to do? Even going back to, hugging your auntie, right? So also that kind of disconnects you with your wants and needs, like when someone is like punishing you for that or gaslighting you for that. So you start disconnecting from your needs. So as an adult, what you want to do is to perhaps find a safe space with someone or by yourself to explore what my wants and needs are and how can I start to fulfill them, first of all, myself. What would it take for me to put those boundaries in place, what those boundaries are, where I can actually do what I want and without feeling guilty, right? How can I feel safe? Because safe is the kind of the essence you're looking for, right? Yeah. Feeling safe, because boundaries are there to make you feel safe, essentially.
And you were talking about the persecutor. that they have very rigid, strict boundaries set with you. But essentially, to me, it's such a paradox that the persecutor has almost control of all the boundaries, yours included, and tells you or takes away the right for you to set your own boundaries with him.
Mm-hmm.
And this is so fascinating to me, how easy it is to make a victim out of someone. And I think that just a simple question, where does my mind go right now? Do I go instantly into, well, I can't do anything. This is just who I am. This is just how I've been raised. There is nothing for me to change. I just have to suck it up and go. To, what can I do in this situation? And I think that is just the first awareness step into something might be wrong. And
Mm-hmm.
I need to change it. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It's again going back to those questions, but even when you're not entirely sure like what's going on, your first clue is the discomfort.
Yeah.
Right? Sometimes the reason why we are not perhaps aware that we have to set boundaries or we have unhealthy boundaries is we can't, first of all, we can't name it. We misinterpret boundaries. We think like, oh, I'm just being mean. I would be mean if I said no to this person, right? So what's helpful is to really look at what are my boundaries, what is my definition of boundaries, and then because they may be very misleading, right? And then they make you, if someone who let's say has rigid boundaries and is very much, no, you have to do this, and puts you in a position of a victim where you feel like you can't do anything, then you look into like, okay, so what does that mean for me if I want to say something, if I want to not like talk back, but if I want to express my opinion,
Right, what I need right now, not what everyone else needs, because I have a right to feel a need as well.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I think it's important to say that discomfort is not necessarily a bad thing, because when you're changing unhealthy boundaries and going to healthy boundaries, that is also very unpleasant because it's a change. And like we talked many times, our brains do not like change because we like the way it is. Because our brain knows what to expect. Even we're unhappy, even though we know it might be toxic for us, like smoking, and we want to quit, our brain is comfortable. Our brain is feeling roasty toasty because that's what it knows. But I agree. I agree with the discomfort. I think discomfort, again, feelings and emotions, and they can be joyous, happy, pleasant, but they can also be unpleasant, not necessarily unhappy to you, but it doesn't mean they're bad. I think, again, it's just an indicator of our body trying to tell us something. So again, at the beginning again, we've come full circle, I think.
That's the best thing about it. You can go like you can explore it in a circle, you can go to different avenues, and there is so much to it. But yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I love it. Susie, is there anything else you would like to say to our audience, like a message or something that is on your mind?
Okay. Anything?
And it's okay to say no.
Okay, no, I think what the thing is, because there are so many ideas that I think I would like to share, but I guess to summarize all this is that you're in the center of all this, and you have a choice, and it's not really your fault when you have boundaries that when you feel that something is not working for you now. You can choose how you treat yourself if you decide to go on a journey of setting new boundaries, and whether you want to do it on your own or with someone else, there is always support out there, so start asking yourself, the questions that are taking you to the place that is taking you where you want to go. And I think one thing that came up for me as you were talking just a minute ago, and I think what I would like to share is basically, because we're talking about these things now, and people who are listening to this and watching your podcast, and we're here, right, in present moment. And what happened, our childhood, right? So we're here now, we realize that, okay, my boundaries are this way or that way. Some of them are great, some of them are not. Mm-hmm. So what I would say is ask yourself what, for example, as a parent, right? You're parent to be, ask yourself, what kind of parent do I want to be? What kind of boundaries do I want to have within myself, with my partner, with my children, in my relationship, right? Multiple questions. But essentially, because you can't really change what has happened so far, you can learn from it, right? So now as you go forward, ask yourself, what do I want that relationship to look like, to sound like? Because boundaries are not only words, but they're also actions. And what do I want that to feel like? So 3 very important areas what you want to get clear on. And yeah, now as I'm talking, I think saying like the verbalizing the boundaries, because we may be surprised how many times we actually wait for people. There is this phenomena, there are many different they're called cognitive distortions. What our brain, it's like shortcuts for us, but they are not really helpful. And one of them is, for example, mind reading. So we expect other people, or fortune telling, right? So we expect other people to know what we want and what we think. And then we get upset or resentful without communicating the need. So one very, very, very important part in setting a healthy boundary is to actually share it. It may sound very trivial, very simple, but it's about verbalizing it. So, you may be physically doing things, but the other person may not be picking up the clues. Especially, I think, I don't know, like, at least that's what I've noticed. For women, we are more, or female energy is more like intuitive. So we sometimes pick up the things and we kind of respond to them, right? Whereas for men, very simplistically speaking, right? Like our male energy is more logical, right? So sometimes when we come with the clues and cues, they don't get it. Not because they don't want to, but because they don't speak that language, right? So, but whether it's communication between you and your partner, or it's about verbalizing those needs. So if you need something, instead of getting upset because, for example, the typical phrase is, if they loved me, or if my partner loved me, they would bring me flowers, right? Without you ever telling them you like flowers, right? That you like receiving flowers. But if you say, honey,
I want flowers.
Right? I want flowers, right? I would love if you bring me flowers, right? There we go. It's a very clear signal, right? So yeah, what kind of relationship do you want to have? What would need to change? What is your part in this? And yeah, you have a choice.
And it's being respectful to the partner by telling, by respecting that he might just not know what I'm thinking about. I am getting upset here for nothing. I created my own rabbit hole that I'm just crawling into, and he has no idea, and I'm getting mad at him for that. So wonderfully said. Thank you so much, Zuzi, for this.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's such an amazing topic.
I could talk for hours on end on this topic, but I understand that not everyone. So thank you. But tell us, please, where can people find you and reach you?
Okay, so people can find me on my website, www.zuzanasvepešová.com, and also I'm very active on Facebook under my name, Zuzana Svepešová. So I'm there every day from Monday to Friday. So if they feel like they want to speak to me or perhaps book a call, there is a link available there on my website. And we can have no string attached call, and we can have a look perhaps how we can work together to help them set boundaries in their relationships. And I'm also on LinkedIn as well, so again under my own name. So, and now on your podcast as well, so if they want to see me as well, I'm here. So yes.
Wonderful. Thank you. And Susie, one last question. Are there any books you would recommend to our listeners or viewers?
Absolutely. One of them is called Not Nice. It's a blue cover. I can't really tell you what the author is. It's so one of them is called Not Nice, and another one is, I've got here, and that is Set Boundaries, Find Peace. And that's Guide to Reclaiming Yourself.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I will put it underneath the video. I'll find the author for the other book, and I'll drop some of my books too that helped me setting boundaries. So yeah, this was lovely. Thank you so much. I loved having you, and I hope this is not the end, and that we'll find a topic in the future that we'll dive into together. So thank you.
That would be amazing. Thank you very much, Vivi, for having me and for being able to discuss all these amazing topics, which I think we touched on relationships and motherhood and children, but I think what we've discussed, I think people can take and use in so many other areas of life. So I think that's a great thing. And yeah, I hope we managed to bring an empowering light on these things like boundaries, which can be often seen as mean and maybe uncomfortable and guilt, and how to work with that, and and how to perhaps get out of that dynamic of drama if we find ourselves in that. So yeah, thank you for
you're welcome, Susie. My pleasure. And I would just say one last thing that you just said. Let's try and be uncomfortable and being comfortable.
Love it.
Being uncomfortable by being comfortable, essentially.
Yes. Yeah, what a mantra. I love it.
And that's it. We talked about boundaries today. I hope you really liked it. I loved it. I learned something new. I hope you did too. If you did, please hit the subscribe button now so me and you can share the word on awareness of boundaries together. If you're a mama, a health coach, a spiritual healer, or just like Zuzana, a dating coach, and you have a story you'd like to share with me, or you have some insight you'd like to share, or you know of someone who has a story they'd like to share with me, please don't hesitate and reach out to me either via Facebook or LinkedIn, where I can be reached under my name, Viviane Schima, or via my email address, which is birthbyviviane@gmail.com. I'll be excited to hear from you. That is it for me for now, and Zuzana, and stay tuned for more interesting episodes. Bye.